Welcome to the Political Insider and our long-awaited weekly chat with the ultimate insider, and that is Mr. Musi Maimane. Musi, welcome back to the Political Insider.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for having me.
Another week full of stuff happening. And I'd like to kick off with something that I saw you put out, an opinion piece. It came out, I saw it in the Daily Maverick. I'm sure it went out in a few other places, where you talk about our problems with the tariffs, which are about to be implemented, our 30% tariffs with the USA, as being where the blame should lie with the GNU, not just the ANC. There's this kind of like understanding that it's just the ANC and their policies, etc., but they're not in government alone. What's the thrust of your thinking there, Musi?
No, thank you, Mike. And first and foremost, what we should really get around to as South Africans is understanding that when you enter a government, especially of a government of national unity, you cease to have a federal government or federated government, if I could say it like that. It's not each party governing its own section of the pie. It is the whole pie. And therefore, we should begin to treat GNU partners as a collective, because cabinet's decisions are decisions of the collective. You can't pick and choose which of those cabinet decisions are ANC, IFP, or anybody. It is a collective. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the GNU has been in existence for a little bit over a year now. And the GNU in its configuration existed to do two things. The first is elect a president, table a budget. A budget indicates for the people of South Africa where your priorities are. And in a year and a half, the biggest threat to any budget has been growth and the rate of investment. And part of that rate of investment was, what do we do about AGOA and the United States? I spoke at our budget passing, budget version 1. I said, if you do nothing else, go strike a deal with the US. The GNU sat on its hands. If you do nothing else, make sure that we reform the economy so that it is an investable place. In other words, if Washington taught us anything, it told us quite categorically, you've got a crime problem. We did nothing. When the real question was put before us about what are some of the policies that hinder even not American businesses, but South African businesses from investing? Because if South African businesses are not investing in this economy, why should Americans suddenly follow suit? They are literally going to be led by South African businesses. So what are the policy things that we need to adjust to achieve that? And more seriously, from a geopolitical foreign policy point of view, when you state that you are non-aligned, well, hosting Iranian delegations, doing all of this kind of work, that really positions you as one who is now on the opposite end of the US, does make life difficult in striking a deal. And for me, what is happening under President Trump is merely a maturation of a situation that has been long unfolding. The ambassadors we've sent to the US in the last 10 years have not always helped us. There wasn't a discussion. Every time I went to Washington, people weren't thinking about South Africa, let alone talking about it. And whilst this narrative about South Africa, if you like, seemingly becoming anti-West in some ways, has been simmering, nobody has bothered to say, how do we reset that over a period of time? And so, without doubt, Mike, I think that the GNU must take absolute responsibility. Foreign policy in South Africa and all over the world has become a very, very serious issue, as every country in the world, whether you are India, whether you are South Korea, whether you are Japan, anybody realizes that we are now at the point of globalization, to a point where when one economy struggles in one way or another, its impact is all over the world. And therefore, it was irresponsible for the GNU to simply just ignore a deteriorating relationship with the US, and the efforts being put into the restoration of that being such that they've been short, or at times poor in execution, and in some instances late in the day, whereas this should have been agenda on day one.
Yeah, we're going to come back to the GNU in a second, and I want to pick up on foreign policy, because you mentioned their outdated alliances in that opinion piece. And I think that's, Yeah, is that what you're talking about when you're saying we say we're non-aligned, but we have these outdated? In fact, we are aligned, but we are aligned to people where that may have outlived its usefulness.
South Africa recently, in fact, the ANC hosted what it called liberation movements, and ZANU-PF were there, SWAPO, Frelimo, you name them, they were there. Now, those alliances were built in a time of fighting for liberation. Many of the alliance partners have turned from liberators to dictators to anti-democrats. ZANU-PF being a very good example of that. Yet when ZANU-PF is in South Africa, it is treated as though it is this light in the world of human rights, which it is by far not. It is the complete opposite of that. So you create an alliance with that. You create an alliance with Russia, not even just Russia of 2025, but what feels like at times is the Soviet Union. You create an alliance with the belief that says, no, 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 now we're dealing with countries that are so backward in orientation in many ways that we're not concerned about our future alliances. And I'm not here saying to you that our future alliances are America or the West or anything. I'm merely saying that your alliance in foreign policy must be dictated to by trade, must be dictated to by human rights. Therefore, you need to be prospective at saying, what are your trade alliances? Who are you doing business with? Who is helping you? And who sees the world in the same way as you do so that the future of next generations can be preserved? And I'm afraid the ANC's alliances are fairly outdated and have fallen prey to what the economists described as really a foreign policy behaving as though the Berlin Wall is still up.
Yeah. Okay, now let's go back to part of what you're saying, possibly the biggest part, and that is that if you're in the GNU, you have joined the club. You must therefore take blame for the performances of that club. You can't say I'm half in, half out. I was in, but I really didn't like what was going on. I mean, you know, it's like Jeffrey Epstein's island. Either you got onto the plane or you didn't. You can't say I was on the plane, but I didn't do anything. No, you got on the plane. And I mean, are you seeing, am I wrong? Is that the point you're getting to? Because we're seeing that in the metros, for example, where we see the collapse of Johannesburg, etc. And parties like the Patriotic Alliance are trying to make out like they're not part of the alliance that is crashing Johannesburg. Same thing at national level, isn't it?
It is. And at first, I warned about this when I heard parties saying, well, let's tell you what ministers of this party are doing. And let's tell you what. And in some ways, of course, if you are in the GNU, you are trying to demonstrate your competence. But you philosophically must recognize that without a shadow of a doubt, you are enjoined. It is so in law. You are enjoined by the decisions of the cabinet, and therefore you are in that cabinet. We don't have presidents of parties. We have one president. We have one cabinet. And therefore, as a result of that, the failure to table an economic plan, reform plans, to achieve notable growth, to protect citizens, to educate our young people, must be a decision that the GNU takes. Because you can't enjoy the benefits, such as security, blue lights, etc., and fail to say, as one famous person once said, success has many fathers, but defeat is an orphan. You can't pick the successes and say, well, this is a great work. And then when there are defeats, you say, well, we've got nothing to do with that. If the commission fails on Mkwanazi and corruption, all other parties in the GNU must account for that. And it must be true for every other aspect. You know, Mike, this week I celebrate 20 years of marriage. My wife is married to me. She loses the right in many ways to say when the decisions are good, then it was our decision, and when they are bad, it was my decision. Although she might allude to it. But the reality of it is that we are now a union, and we are joined in that way, and therefore we act. And the GNU may not be one party, but when it comes to executive decisions, as is the coalition, and it's true for coalitions all over the world, whether you go to And parties often suffer sometimes from being in a coalition. You will remind it, of course, of the Lib Dems when they entered into a coalition with the Conservatives in the UK, how it affected the Lib Dems. But throughout the coalition, the Lib Dems didn't keep saying, well, that's Conservative policy, this is our policy, we therefore implemented the program of government. It is true in Germany. Right now, when parties are in coalition together, they negotiate, they work hard about what the plan of action is. But when the coalition does not hold to the plan and parties get to a point where they say, we don't agree with that decision, then they really should either pull out or support. But you don't get the right to be, we're in, but we're not in support. Because once you pull out, you are then enjoined to the decision.
Now, keeping with that, we did hear President Ramaphosa say that they're investigating the option of even expanding the GNU further. And names are mentioned of Action SA and the National Coloured Congress. And then there was like a sub-mention of Build One South Africa, but that was just sort of seemingly conversation. Tell us about expanding GNU and your parties. Have you been approached? Haven't you been approached?
Well, Mike, I start with when the GNU was established, we were sent a statement of intent. We looked at it, we said, this is nice. And then what? Because a statement of intent may say something like we are committed to fighting corruption. But what does it mean when you've got so many acts of corruption? When I asked the economic plan, tell me what is the plan? Because along with what the ANC's national executive resolutions after this weekend, the president went to great lengths to say, whilst the elections last year were a strategic setback, the GNU was a tactical tool to advance the ANC's agenda. 31 years on, the ANC's agenda has brought us to this point. And now the question must be asked, do we want to continue with it? Do we want to continue with some of the economic policy issues that are on the table? What reforms do we want to put? What things have worked and what things haven't worked? What do we need to, as business people would say, start, stop, continue? So to answer your question in a long way, as Build One South Africa, we're very intentional. I said to them, let us table a plan for reform. So that when we're in cabinet, I don't have to be arguing with you about things. I can say to you, here's what the agreed plan is, and off we execute it. And off we find a budget for it. And therefore we table a budget consistent with that plan to achieve economic growth. And therefore, when I heard that it was an expansion, whilst we're not shut off, we simply just said to ourselves, well, I look forward to the plan so that whatever expansion you put on or decrease you put on must be predicated on what is in the interest of the people of South Africa rather than the political parties. We took a principle stance up front to say we wouldn't join the GNU because we wanted to be clear. What was the plan? I'm happy to serve the interests of South Africa and South Africans as long as the plan is for the interest of South Africa and South Africans. What I'm certainly not wanting to do is simply just be in a bus called the GNU, but be very unclear about what the destination of that bus is. And so when the president says about an expansion, I think in part is a response to the DA rather than responding to another political party instead of the people of this country.
Yeah, and that little civil war seems to be ongoing and absolutely consuming the ANC right now. This plan to sort of topple and kick the DA out of the GNU, that seems to be the only thing that keeps that binds the party together right now.
It's not a helpful discussion to be having because on both parties, a doubtful coalition is a deeply worrying thing because in some ways, when I think about the investment thesis of any country, you can go to a country knowing as when you want to run a business there to go, this is who I'm dealing with, this is who I will be dealing with next year, and these are the rules we've agreed on and we'll stick to them. When there's doubt from an investment thesis point of view, you're not sure who the government is today, you're not sure who the government is going to be next week, that is problematic. So perhaps maybe in some ways, expansion might bring about a certain level of stability and predictability for people to know, well, in 5 years, this is who the government is going to be. So as we invest, we know what the outcomes of that are going to be. But whenever there seems to be this backwards and forwarding, what has happened is all of us have sat on tenterhooks, wondering if the budget will pass, if a law will pass, if it will be implemented. I think that is the worst scenario. It is better to have a certainty in a course of direction rather than this doubtful coalition that we're starting to see.
Now, Musi, just to change tack, and you were talking about having a plan. It seems like the CEO of the IDT had a plan. You wanted to make mention of that. That is a subsidiary. It's a state-owned entity. It's at the Development Trust, isn't it? And they sort of do some infrastructure work. And the CEO was caught trying to bribe Peter Louis Myburgh, the journalist who had uncovered some malfeasance within the IDT. So what was her plan?
I am blown away by the story. I mean, and enough has been said about the fact that this CEO should have been arrested, etc., etc. But what blows me away is that here's someone accused of close to 900 million rands worth of graft. Their fear isn't the police, isn't anybody else. It is that a story is being told about them. And so the immediate impulse, which is, who do I bribe? They think, let me go bribe the people who hold the microphone, rather than, if you really are corrupt, if you really fear anybody, go bribe the police. But no, they think if you kill the story, then no one is going to come after you. It is an omnishambles of note, but it speaks to the core of the problem of corruption, is that when people see politicians, senior people, get seen in public, it feels for many South Africans that the only outrage that those political or personal interest people must manage is the PR rather than their legal battles. It must be your first. I would hope that by this weekend, the CEO is behind bars, for the simple reason that it not only tells people that we still can enforce our laws, but it is beyond the pale that there's no ethical leadership in this country. That even when there's video evidence of you bribing somebody, you haven't even bothered to tender your resignation, given up the thing, and handed yourself over to the police. It must come with a high level of a demand for ethics in this country. We are losing it, and many people in South Africa, I genuinely believe, are honest people who want honest public representatives. It's the corrupt ones who end up corrupting our society and making people believe that South Africans aren't, if you like, God-fearing or people who want to be ethical in their conduct. And therefore, I would urge right now that rather than them fearing the PR exercise, they should fear the police.
And Musi, I'd like to close off with something that's hit the news, and it's a perplexing one, and that is that Parliament has formed an ad hoc committee to look into the allegations made by Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi about political interference in crime, etc. Set up the ad hoc committee to do some investigations, and then put as the head of that commission, the investigative committee, somebody from the ANC. Now, it's somebody you know, but do you not think that politicians would be doing themselves a bit of a service by getting somebody else to head up that commission?
I mean, to our earlier conversation, is this a continuation of managing the interests of party or getting to the bottom of the issue? I happen to know Soviet Lekhanyani serves in our committee. I found him forthright and honest, and I think that he'll continue the job. But in an ideal universe, this should have been a committee that, given the fact that the ANC sits at the core of some of the difficulties that have been faced in the police, and mainly because they're the only ones who've been running the police for the last 31 years. So it is in their interest to make sure that independence is sought above all else. And if the DA is not ideal for that, there'd be nothing wrong with getting a chairperson from one of the other parties who is not interested in the outcome or in the preservation of any particular outcome, but really getting to the bottom of what Mkhwanazi has made as an allegation, because without a shadow of a doubt, this matter sits at the core of everything that we know as South Africans. And but given the fact that there were certain ANC politicians who were implicated in the thing, I think it would have been the best step to say, let's establish someone from another party who could make sure that the process is not only transparent, but that the information isn't first seen with a political lens, but with a justice lens as to start off with.
Well, that would be a great starting point, Musi. Thank you so much for your contribution today. A lot of food for thought again, and really, this has become a much sought-after segment of the Political Insider. Thank you so much for joining us. To everybody that watched this, thank you.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, please subscribe to the channel so we can keep this information coming. Musi, once again, thanks for sparing the time. To everybody out there, we'll see you again on the Political Insider. Musi, thank you very much.